The Israel-Palestinian conflict, a seemingly endless cycle of violence and despair, has once again erupted, shattering a fragile ceasefire and casting a dark shadow over the region. On March 18, 2025, Israeli forces launched a series of airstrikes on the Gaza Strip, targeting what they claimed were Hamas military installations. This latest outbreak of hostilities has resulted in a heavy toll on Palestinian civilians, further deepening the humanitarian crisis in the impoverished enclave. The international community has reacted with alarm and condemnation, urging both sides to exercise restraint and return to the negotiating table. The situation remains highly volatile, with the potential for further escalation looming large. The root causes of this decades-long conflict, including the Israeli occupation of Palestinian territories and the displacement of millions, continue to fuel the flames of violence, making a lasting peace seem like an elusive dream. As the world watches with bated breath, the people of Gaza are left to grapple with the devastating consequences of this latest chapter in a seemingly endless conflict. The international community must act swiftly and decisively to prevent further bloodshed and work towards a just and lasting solution that guarantees the rights and security of both Israelis and Palestinians. In January 2025, after months of intense fighting and bloodshed, a ceasefire agreement was reached between Israel and Hamas, the militant group that controls the Gaza Strip. This agreement, brokered by Egypt and Qatar, brought a much-needed respite from the violence, but it always remained a fragile and uncertain truce. The agreement called for a phased approach, with the first phase focusing on a cessation of hostilities and the release of hostages held by both sides. However, deep-seated mistrust and unresolved issues, particularly regarding the status of Jerusalem and the right of return for Palestinian refugees, cast a long shadow over the agreement. The second phase of the ceasefire, which was intended to address these more contentious issues, never materialized. Negotiations stalled, and both sides accused each other of violating the terms of the agreement. The situation on the ground remained tense, with sporadic outbreaks of violence serving as a constant reminder of the fragility of the peace. The failure to capitalize on the momentum of the January ceasefire and address the underlying causes of the conflict set the stage for the latest eruption of violence, leaving the people of Gaza once again caught in the crossfire. The relative calm of the ceasefire was shattered in the early hours of March 18, 2025, when Israeli warplanes launched a series of devastating airstrikes on targets across the Gaza Strip. The Israeli military claimed that the strikes were in response to Hamas's refusal to release hostages captured during the October 2023 war and its continued rocket fire into Israeli territory. The strikes targeted a wide range of locations, including residential areas, government buildings, and what Israel alleged were Hamas military installations. Among the casualties were several high-ranking Hamas officials, including Essam Adaliz, a member of the group's political bureau. The attack sent shockwaves through Gaza, killing over 400 Palestinians, injuring hundreds more, and spreading fear and panic among the civilian population. Hospitals, already overwhelmed by the ongoing humanitarian crisis, struggled to cope with the influx of casualties. Section 4. The human cost of conflict. The latest Israeli offensive has exacerbated the already dire humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip. The Palestinian enclave, home to over 2 million people, has been under an Israeli blockade for over a decade, crippling its economy and leaving its population dependent on humanitarian aid. The relentless bombardment has displaced thousands of Palestinians from their homes, forcing them to seek refuge in overcrowded UN shelters, where conditions are often unsanitary and inadequate. The destruction of infrastructure, including power plants and water treatment facilities, has further compounded the suffering of civilians, leaving them without access to basic necessities. The international community has condemned the attacks and called for an immediate cessation of hostilities. However, with the Israeli government vowing to continue its military operations until Hamas releases the hostages and ceases its rocket attacks, the prospects for a swift end to the violence appear dim. Section 5. International condemnation and calls for restraint. The international community has reacted with widespread condemnation to the latest Israeli offensive in Gaza. The United Nations Security Council held an emergency meeting to discuss the situation, but a resolution calling for a ceasefire was blocked by the United States, Israel's closest ally. The European Union, while expressing concern over Hamas's rocket attacks, condemned the disproportionate use of force by Israel and called for an immediate end to the violence. Egypt and Qatar, which have played key roles in mediating previous ceasefires, have also urged both sides to exercise restraint and return to the negotiating table. However, with the Israeli government facing domestic pressure to secure the release of the hostages and Hamas determined to resist what it views as Israeli aggression, the calls for peace have so far gone unheeded. Section 6. The View from Jerusalem, Israel's Justification. The Israeli government has defended its military operation in Gaza as a necessary response to Hamas's provocations. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, facing mounting domestic pressure over his handling of the hostage crisis and a series of corruption scandals, has accused Hamas of violating the ceasefire and jeopardizing the lives of the hostages. Netanyahu has vowed to continue the military campaign until Hamas releases the hostages and ceases its rocket fire into Israeli territory. He has also accused Hamas of using Palestinian civilians as human shields, a charge that has been echoed by other Israeli officials. The Israeli government has also criticized the international community for what it views as a double standard, arguing that Israel has the right to defend itself against terrorism just like any other sovereign nation. Section 7. Hamas responds, Defiance in the face of aggression. Hamas, the militant group that controls the Gaza Strip, has condemned the Israeli offensive as a massacre and a violation of international law. The group has vowed to continue its resistance against the Israeli occupation, accusing Israel of using the hostage crisis as a pretext to launch a pre-planned attack on Gaza. Hamas has also called on the international community to hold Israel accountable for its actions and to pressure the Israeli government to lift the blockade on Gaza. The group has denied using civilians as human shields, accusing Israel of deliberately targeting residential areas. While Hamas has not ruled out the possibility of negotiating a new ceasefire, it has insisted that any agreement must include the release of Palestinian prisoners held in Israeli jails and an end to the blockade on Gaza.